Okay, we are recording. If you want me to pause the recording or whatever, just wave your hands or put in the chat or let us know to pause the recording if you want to say anything off the record.
I really appreciate Gary's father time persona. I think this works for him really well.
Okay, so let's see. Do we have any? We don't have any new members here. We've all been here before. So let's just make the round and let us know what's on your mind. Gary, you want to?
Well, I've been playing with code.world, which is a way to learn Haskell programming, and it was developed for middle schoolers, and I can highly recommend it. It's the only time Haskell's ever made any sense to me, and so I'm having a lot of fun with that. And I'm learning about L systems, which is sort of like context-free grammars, and they're used to produce these. They're called algorithmic trees and algorithmic biology, and they were invented by this guy back in the 60s, and he wrote a book, The Algorithmic Beauty of Plants, and so I'm getting into that, and I put links in the collab about all of that. So that's where I've been, and I've kind of been away from RChain for a little while, but these are tools that I'm starting to open my eyes to what I'm going to be able to do as a developer, and how difficult things are going to be. So a lot of learning going on my part, but oh, and I did make a robot. Does anybody want to see the robot I created for MacRobot? I made him an avatar, and I want to show that off in a recording because I'm really proud of it. I guess it was in general. Ta-da! MacRobot. And you click on this link. Let me show you what's happening with this code. Oh, not the Twitter link. I want to go to the Code World link that was in the original tweet. And so it pulls up the program that I used to write it. That this is like Haskell Lite. It's got a lot of functions available to you at the get-go, but with the power of something like Haskell, which is like Scala. And Idris, which we're learning about in Dan's Saturday morning. But
that's very cool. It's mathematical programming.
It's definitely mathematical programming, and you get your editor, and you can run it. This errors in Haskell actually make sense for the first time in my life. I read a Haskell error and I know where my problem is. And this is the first time, and it's certainly not in Rolang. Rolang is kind of, well, there's one of those errors again. So start fiddling with asterisks and at signs. But so Haskell's a great thing, but this code.world is, I just love it. So I'll shut up now. And any questions or next speaker? Okay, I call on Ned.
Hey guys,
Hey, Ned.
Hey, Ned.
so I'm really running behind my personal schedule this morning, so I apologize. But I'm just listening. So, anybody have any questions for me? Otherwise, I'll go on mute. All right, so I'll pass it to Fabian.
I don't have much to report. I'm really just listening in and trying to keep up with the work and all. I will say that our crew has been discussing amendments around IOB5, and hopefully next week we'll have something to share with you guys. That's it. I'll hand the talking stick over to Ian.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we were discussing IOB5 a bit and reasons why it may be necessary to modify the number of rocks that IOB5 is governing because of regulatory compliance, as well as just getting some more money into the co-op to pick up any shortfall between what we raise in the current sale and when we have our mainnet release. So just some good reasons to be looking into it and talking about it right now. I'll pass it on to Bill, hot potato.
Thanks, Ian. Let's see. Well, on that topic of the IOB5 and whether to burn or to sell the rocks, I mean, that's certainly, I think, something of a lot of interest to a lot of people. And it gets me thinking about the makeup of the membership of the co-op and the influence of different parties or different individuals with different stakes and interests in our project overall, and why they're involved and what influence they can or should have in steering the direction or influencing the direction of the project itself. Because certainly a lot of individuals who invest into the project want to see a return on their investment, and the project needs that investment in order to keep going. But I counter that a little bit with the thinking more purely about the tech and its intentions of being developed for usability and finding bigger solutions for large problems. At least that's, Greg's intention, as I understand it, from trying to get this thing off the ground. So just adding to that, and to say that's certainly something I'm thinking about. No actions, of course, to place on it, but if anybody else has any comments on it, open up. Otherwise, let Daryl talk.
Well, Bill, you actually just completely connected the two dots that are things that have been I've been focusing on this week. It was that was really well worded. Like I share your concerns about is who we are as a co-op right now, and I think it is directly connected to this IOB5 issue. So yeah, I mean, I've just I also feel what Ian had to say as well, and just the whole kind of to me, I guess I keep going back to this Lumio document that kind of talks about the importance of the why in an organization, and organizations that do well and flourish really have a clear why, so that it doesn't have to be reminded. Everybody just knows, and they start to act accordingly. And so that's the other thing that I've just been kind of focusing on a lot, is just trying to kind of figure out how we can come to a why, how we can put that to the membership, and how the membership can kind of all come to some kind of an agreement. I know it's been attempted before, but I think maybe now's another time to try it again. And that's about all I have to say right now.
So I guess that leaves me left.
And Gary.
No, we did Gary.
Oh, sorry.
But he can, if you want, Gary didn't reflect on the IOB5 issue yet, which he could do. I mean, I've been engaged with running robot from Keybase and bridging, although I'm not sure I've done much there since last week on that. Quitting smoking cigarettes. You know, I'm got a nicotine crutch here that I'm using, but still feeling kind of weirded out from not being used to not being a smoker.
Well, good for you for trying to take the step there, Jim.
Absolutely, Jim, man. Keep going.
Now, as far as this IOB5 issue goes, I mean, I feel like I was opposed to it to begin with. And I think it was misguided in terms of where we were even at that time. But where we are today, I think it would be very foolish for us to carry out the terms of IOB5. I think it's an existential issue, and that we have to have the runway not only to get through mainnet, but to actually sustain ourselves through Venus. I think it's necessary that we formulate some kind of IOB6 or something that says, our situation has changed, and the co-op needs to be able to sell the rock rather than burn it at this point, and membership needs to understand that our survival depends on it to a large extent. And I think this red herring of 50% of the tax and all this other stuff is just going to create arguments, and I think we need to just forget that. The SEC policies on crypto and everything else are evolving. Everybody has different opinions on what they are. Even legal people don't agree. I think if we try to engage people and argue points about, whether we should hold 50% or not, is going to be a distraction and should be avoided, and simply ensure our survival and our future by taking advantage of the currency that we've created for our own use. And this comes back to what's this about. This is is if RChain was about, creating a scarce token that was going to gain value. Well, it still would be very foolish for the people that support that view to consider, not allowing RChain to use its financial resources properly, and to threaten its success. I think, I really think the members can be together in understanding that, and I think we need perhaps a stipulation on how this. I think there are people who fear that, given the ability to sell tokens and use them for any purpose they want is a scary thing to some people, and maybe this IOB 6 or 7, whatever it would be, needs to stipulate some controls or limits on how funds from the sale of tokens can be spent. So rather than burning them, we're allocating them to be spent for fundamental needs of the development of the RChain platform.
It's pretty hard to write those kind of rules in stone, and I think it would be preferable to just have more intelligent, engaged members participating in the governance who could be involved in that kind of decision. But if you write it into a bylaw, it might have the effect of tying the hands of the leadership in a time when they have to act quickly.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I agree. I actually think I totally agree with what you guys just said, and I have always felt IOB5 was the wrong way to go about that. I think that, normally that's up to the board and the executive committee, and I think IOB5 in some ways was a protest against the way the membership felt the board and the executive were treating the currency, and but the implementation was not correct. So, maybe we need to roll back IOB5 and instead look at a better way of governance around deposing a board or an executive when their actions don't fall in line with the will of the people or what the members feel is the appropriate way to run the company. I mean, that's more of a traditional, way that most companies operate. And, like Jim and Ian said, or maybe Ian, times change. The economic climate changes, opportunities come up, and you need people who are able to, steer the ship of the company and, take advantage of those opportunities as they appear, and also to mitigate against risk when, the overall business and economics surrounding the company, turn to the downside, right? Mitigating risk is almost the most important job of a board and an executive. So, I mean, and that this has always been my take on the whole IOB5 issue. That we need to change the governance model, perhaps. But anyway, that's what I want to say. Thanks. All right, did I lull everybody to sleep?
No, no, not at all, Ned. Not at all.
In the chat, there was a little bit of discussion about Ethereum, because that's really been in the news lately with Vitalik talking about moving some traffic to Bitcoin Cash. If any, I don't know if this is the right venue, but if folks want to talk about that, a couple of us were just talking about it about a half hour ago.
And related, Jim, I've asked you for a request onto your Google Doc.
So I was telling a story about back before the co-op was started, Greg Meredith started participating with Vlad Zamfir in his Casper proof of stake research group. And in one of those early meetings, Vitalik was in the meeting as well. So you had Greg Meredith, Vlad, Vitalik, and there were a couple other people there. And Greg was making the case for a major upgrade to Ethereum to deal with scaling issues and to implement a mobile process calculus way back then. And everybody loved the idea, but Vitalik was really concerned that would cause problems for all the people who were already writing applications for Ethereum at the time. And Greg came back and said, well, it's worth making a breaking change right now, because otherwise you're just going to incur more and more technical debt and make it harder for the day when Ethereum just isn't scaling enough, and you're going to have to break it eventually anyway. And it seems like that day has come. So it's a fun time to review the history, because I think that's the moment when Greg decided, well, if Ethereum's not going to come along with this, it just has to be built. And then he started RChain. So I don't have the date on that, but it's a cool story, and we're going to try to get some kind of write up, because it's timely right now.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So that's part of the why of RChain, because the technology has to scale. That's
a significant story, Ian. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
It's huge. It's like a huge opportunity for us to kind of get the word out in a natural way. It doesn't have to be hyped or promoted. It just needs to get out to the right people in the community in the right way. And I think we could potentially really help with this situation. Whether that means us working closer with Ethereum, or who knows how it could transpire, but it could be a really great thing for everyone. And the whole idea of it being connected to the why, that really excites me as well. And to me, it can kind of also help us, help work on the how, which is another really important thing. Once we have our why, is the how, which is how does RChain help mitigate global warming? I think to a lot of people, it sounds like a pretty abstract, spaced out hippie concept. They don't really kind of see the connection. So I think this would be a great opportunity to kind of show that.
I'll just speak very frankly. I think our continued repetition of how it'll help global warming hurts us. We really need to finish what we are doing right now. The why is clear, and especially the added information that's coming in based on where historically we're standing on the crypto blockchain timeline and seeing how things are shaking up in the world of Ethereum and how that relates to what was prophesized years ago by Greg. We're seeing it now, and that is really the focal point, I think. But when it comes down to all of the added things that we speak about around what can this technology do, you know, I think more often than not, whenever it's brought up around, you know, the core why, you know, from Greg regarding global warming and the such, many times it has come to, excuse my language, bite us in the ass. And I think we really need to finish the work and also just get the most basic DApp possible done on the platform. Something needs to be built. The grandiose vision of what we can accomplish on a larger scale is all great and well, but I think we really need to set up some very basic building blocks that can do things on the platform. So just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I wouldn't dispute anything you said there. I think we could be in agreement on that. Like, yeah, I guess I was also kind of trying to bring in the practical, like, you know, the concept of the how. I think is important. Otherwise, we do kind of sound like spaced out hippies when we talk about it.
Yeah.
Do we know of any members that are actually trying to build a DApp onto the platform?
Gary, Jim, you know?
Not specifically. I mean, I keep hearing from Dimworm, there are 21, maybe it's up to 23 developers in the Chinese community. And, you know, what we've seen is a half-baked gambling app, which, you know, he's like touting as the greatest thing since sliced bread. I was really unimpressed by what I did see of it. And I've actually reached out to him and asked him many times, can I help? Is there any support we can give? And it's just kind of been deaf ears. So I don't know if that means they may not be really engaged, or if it means that they're keeping things close to the vest, which is fine. I get that. And so there's also, actually there's one more, which is some kind of decentralized exchange they were talking about building, but, you know, I don't know, it's been a little quiet from their side, you know, when, you know, we've reached out to them.
I mean, everybody knows I'm not a developer, but I mean, I just kind of wonder if that's something that the community should begin to look into. I mean, we look on the outside talking, you know, we talk about, you know, we need people from the outside to come and build on our platform. What if we started to build something on it ourselves?
You mean co-op funded, or getting the membership to do it?
Getting the membership to do it.
And that's what, you know, that's what we've been trying to do. I mean, you know, I started attending the DApp collab meetings. There are really no developers, you know, attending that. A couple of people more from the project management side, but no what I would call Rolang developers. You know, listen, it's a tricky situation now. You know, what do we have to attract, you know, real developers?
Yep. This goes back to the win. RChain needs a win. And this situation of what's going on in the Ethereum world could potentially be that needed win to attract developers to the platform. For people, you know, look, everyone knows about the scalability issues on Ethereum. Everyone knows for, you know, for a long time that they're not going to be able to do what they say they're going to do. And now, with the conversation saying that they're looking at building on Bitcoin Cash, it's a prime opportunity for some type of a PR marketing campaign to get the information out there that cites back to what RChain was. You know, look, RChain was being built in the very beginning based upon, if I'm correct in this, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that, you know, Greg was working with the Ethereum guys. Is like, look, you can't build it, and here's the solution. And they said no to his solution, and then RChain was born. Would that be correct?
Not really. Actually, I would say that that it was actually the scenario. So, everyone was working on this open source social network. And then Dor from Scenario and Greg had a bit of a headbutting experience, because Greg came to the realization that in order to build Scenario, you have to build a proper blockchain, correct by construction, scalable solution. And so Greg started venturing towards that, and Dor was like, I don't have enough time for that. And that's kind of what broke off Scenario. And then all in the midst of it all, Ethereum shows up in a way. And so it was all kind of intermixed at that point in time. That's why I was curious with Ian, like, what was the timeline of when that conversation happened?
Yeah, I think there was a certain assumption that Scenario would go on Ethereum. And as we got into it, we realized that Ethereum was not capable of supporting it as it's
Yeah.
Right, and that's when Greg got involved in these conversations about scaling Ethereum. And the time range was one of the first meetings, like maybe the fifth or so meeting of that Casper proof of work research group that Vlad started.
So I want to say something. Sorry. Okay, clear mouth. So I think one thing it's really important that we don't forget is we are far from having any kind of mass adoption for any blockchain crypto project, right? I mean, there is really, at this point, just nothing that is enticing the public at large. So we are still, and I think we have to remember this, we are still the early adopters, this is like, oh God, what year? 1995-ish. When I had my Motorola flip phone, but I had somehow managed to rip some videos from DVDs. And I'm sitting there on my commuter train watching videos on my little, what was it, a 2-inch screen. And, everybody's still reading their newspapers. So it was like, I was so far ahead of the curve. And we have to remember that's where we are now. It's, even if we had the greatest, most together, blockchain since, the dawn of infancy, there's just, the masses are just not ready to adopt us. So we are all like the evangelists and the early adopters. And, I just want to remember that yes, we have our flaws and, all this and that, but it's still waiting for the world to catch up to what blockchain has to offer. And even if we came out with the greatest dApp, I mean, Fabian went online and he looked at that dApp radar. I mean, all these dApps are out there and there's like, one user per day, right? I mean, there's just, we can't expect at this point the world to flock to us because it's not kind of paying attention.
So Ned, if it's pretty well known that, okay, blockchain is a good place for supply chain. When we go to look at the dApps that are building on blockchain, we do see the gambling and things like that takes place. But if something were to showcase what the RChain blockchain could do, is there anything that comes to mind that would be it?
Well, it's kind of our song, right? I mean, it's asset management, supply chain. Our song is a great showcase for that. Now, I'm not saying to the extreme that we have to stream everything from the blockchain.
No.
but the contract management, I mean, listen, that's a good story. If we want to get into speed and throughput, that's a great story. Practicality, maybe not, because it's also expensive, right? So, and that's something we haven't really even talked about. But anything with supply chain and digital identity, I think is amazing. And we have, you know, RCat, or the framework that our song was built upon. That I hear Arterial, the fine art company, I heard something, they want some more work done, or they need Kayvon's time a little more.
So again, my question is really about that you wouldn't or couldn't build whatever it is on a different blockchain because it would not be suitable. But so you'd have to go to RChain in order to build it. Because
Well,
that's what I'm saying, is I'm saying, like, you know, for something to be built upon it that really does showcase it, and that people on the outside would look at it and say, oh my God, you could not do this on Bitcoin. You could not do this on Ethereum.
well, I'm not sure. I hear what you're saying. I'm not sure we have to be that extreme, because we haven't even convinced people that they should even be using a blockchain, regardless of which one. Right. So that argument, you know, what sets us apart from Ethereum and Bitcoin, you know, and their blockchains is a good one, but that's to those who've already accepted that you need a blockchain.
Right, but yeah, and I'm glad you know, you're kind of getting on there, because it is about showcasing the point of differentiation, just like you would with any other product on the market, to say that, look, this is so different from everything else that's out there. You can't get this someplace else.
Right. Well,
and that's the attraction.
Yeah, I mean, look at what VeChain just did with Walmart China, right? So that supply chain, and they're going to track 25 food product lines in Walmart China that are known for maybe not the stringent of controls, where from manufacturing all the way to the consumer can go now to Walmart and scan the QR code with their phone, and they can get the whole supply chain information on that product, and also see, you know, is it still within the expiration date, which is huge in China because there's a lot of finagling with that, right? So this is a way for them to trust that data because it's on a blockchain, as opposed to, you could build an application and store it in a database somewhere and put stringent controls, but the blockchain has, because it has the reputation of immutable data, lends itself to that kind of data, right? And that kind of application. You know, we could do the same thing here in this country, like with opioids, right? Tracking opioids, which are known to have a lot of counterfeit. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, there are people who base their, you know, ability to live every day based on opioids. I'm not saying it's a great thing, but we all know that the amount of counterfeit opioids compounds the problem. And, you know, we could go in and talk to these pharmaceutical companies, and we could easily build that kind of application, you know, in that vertical space. You know, I've always said supply chain totally lends itself to blockchain, you know, development. Mm-hmm. And I think, Bill, that's one place we could make that argument.
Yeah, I like your China example particularly. That was good.
So who do we know that works at a pharmaceutical company? We must know somebody somewhere. All those on.
But even before pharmaceutical companies, I mean, this is the thing that Greg has been echoing, you know, since I got involved, is you start with something that's low risk. And once you're able to prove that you can do a low risk DApp, you build from there. It starts with music. It starts with games. It starts with things where you're not risking anybody's life. Because once you start entering into the space of supply chain and moving medication around and keeping track of real life assets that are moving from, you know, one country to another country, before we can even get there, I think the first piece of the puzzle is to be able to make sure that something as basic as how a digital asset performs in the wild and how monies are distributed and tracking how it works. If whoever can get that right, which again, we've spoken about this, we haven't seen any blockchain-based DApp do it. I haven't seen it. And I always ask if someone could please point me towards a blockchain-based DApp that is doing it in any industry and has achieved some level of usership, mass adoption, and is real working business, please show it to me, because I haven't seen it yet. In ticketing, in music, in supply chain, nothing.
Well, VChain, I mean, I would say VChain is the furthest ahead on the adoption curve. And, but no, you bring up a great point, because that's what I'm saying. We are all still the visionaries. We are still the early adopters. We are still the ones who believe in the tech when other people out there have no clue, right? I mean, my brother's, a lawyer, a high-paid, intelligent lawyer, and he doesn't understand why we need blockchain, and so, it's funny, his wife gets it more than he does. But when I hit him up with like, oh, Bitcoin, and it's it's anti-fiat, and it's how we're going to fight back against the government, and he doesn't care. Listen, if the stock market collapses, I mean, who knows? Maybe then people will care. But right now, there's no compelling argument for him that he should have this law firm move all their records to protect the digital ID onto a blockchain, solution. Hey, I just want to mention, if you guys want to get the bejesus scared out of you about what the future may look like, there's this new show on HBO called Years and Years. And
I know about it. I haven't watched it yet. Yeah.
It is. Mm-hmm. It is so dark. Like my wife says, why do we have to watch this before we go to bed? It is so dark, it's addictive. But it's it's like in the adventure games. You go left, and then there's a fork in the road. Depending on which fork, you get a different adventure. So definitely, if we go down a certain fork, where we could be at, it's really dark, but and I would imagine there's a lot of people in our community who think that this is what's going to happen, and so this is why we're building this. But that's certainly not the message for the masses. Anyway, just wanted to mention that. But yeah, we got to keep pushing adoption.
I can see Greg's, and I understand the idea of going low risk, at the beginning, but when you're putting something out onto it that's low risk, you're essentially doing what other people could do in other places, possibly.
Yeah, there's a reason behind that. I mean, we want high volume, low risk, because until we have implemented type safety, I mean, can you imagine these Rolangs flying around at ridiculous speeds without type safety? It's not safe. So until the platform until we have type safety, streaming music and games, that sort of thing makes more sense.
But the other half of what I wanted to say is that I get the low risk, but you got to get to a point where you're showcasing your point of differentiation about how you're different and why you're different.
Well, I think that's back to RChain, right? I mean, if if that we're streaming music to 1,000 users simultaneously, and we could scale, and you could demonstrate, okay, we just had 2,000 users and our performance took a hit. Oh, wait a minute, we spun up some more validators, right? Or we did another shard. And look, we can now handle that in a matter of minutes, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's the kind of demo that we need.
Now,
I would agree with.
For something like streaming, did we check out the economics? I mean, are we going to be economical doing that?
Yes.
When you get to what was it, 1 million users? I mean, we did a spreadsheet, and at some point it does get economical, but we're also still waiting on the full cost accounting. So, and then one of the other issues is actually the storage of the digital music on the blockchain also hasn't been totally worked out, but in some hypotheticals, It's profitable. What was it, 1 million users for break
I
even?
think so. I think it was 1 million. Yeah.
And that was both a streaming subscription and ad-based revenue.
Okay.
It's also going to be a little bit of the chicken and the egg, right? When are the validators going to invest in that kind of hardware? If it's going to take 3 to 6 months, let's say, to hit those kind of streaming numbers where they're making profit. So, there's definitely some business decisions that need to go along with that.
Right. I mean, basically, what would be, I would think, a better case is where the transaction is simple, but the risk is high. I mean, if you take something like a simple payments transaction, so if it gets over X number of dollars, whatever that is, if it's 500 or 1,000 or whatever, then you can make a case for a bank or whoever to say, well, on your high-end transactions, we kind of take away the risk or something like that. So I think it's the point that Bill is making about differentiation and what are the points where this is a sweet spot application. I think it is work that needs to be done.
One thing about those dApps over those top-rated dApps, I looked at the top-rated dApp and it was a gambling dApp.
All gambling.
And you're right, it doesn't have many users on it, 3,000 or so users. But if I'm reading those tables correctly, it looks like they've got more investors. I mean, what they've done is they've used this thing, which is in a prototype now, to attract investors. And so a lot of these dApps that we're going to build aren't going to have the users, but if we can get some of these token dApps up and running, they'll sure look better to investors.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, basically, initially, we should do whatever is doable, given the technology and if the economics are not horrible, and then slowly build up from there. I think anything, whether it does make economic sense or not initially, still might be a valid demo, so to speak, or valid proof point. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this goes back to why we need to raise capital and amend IOB 5, because it's going to take time to get all those apps running and that adoption curve. And the co-op is, and maybe there's a different way to do it, but in my mind, the co-op is going to have to fund those efforts and fund that adoption until we can prove to people who want to come in and be validators. And listen, even if we got other people to sign up as validators, there's going to be some amount of time before they're actually return on their investment. So, does that make sense?
We have 3 minutes left.
I totally agree with everything Ed said.
Yep.
We have 3 minutes left. I think that the focus is going to be more on or can be more on process orchestration that's algorithmically constrained in terms of the major differentiation of the RChain world computer and other world computers. I don't know what that'll mean. But I did want to mention quickly governance. Tomorrow, we have tomorrow's meeting with I guess, considering IOB 5 alternatives and actions there. DApp developers, we had NutZipper has brought up to date the RChain API in JavaScript. Next step will be looking at getting sample apps up using that and see how well it works. And then communications working group that Daryl is meeting, now meeting Wednesday mornings. Blockchain art group is another DApp development group that's starting, and it's meeting on Mondays, and they'll also be attending the RChain group, the RSwan session.
Great.
See you in the next meeting.
In the next one. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.